So thumbnailing is a very important part of concept art because you're trying to get some quick ideas over to a director to make sure you're going in the right direction. They don't want to feel like you just kind of touched on something and went right into a final. They want to see an entire breadth of ideas. And even for them, they want to make sure all these boxes have been checked and they've gone through the entire loop of different ideas and then narrowed it down. And so when we're doing designs like this, I think it's super important that every design looks very different than the one before. Whether it's an entire idea, the silhouette, it's having each one be different enough that it feels like it's presenting an entirely different idea. We have really tried to touch on a completely different type of character, a different look, different proportions. So as we're about to dive into thumbnailing, I wanted to take a description as it was presented to me from a designer on the team. This is a character that's going to serve as a kind of roving merchant that shows up everywhere in the world. He's got his blanket that he can roll out that has all his wares in different pockets, and it seems to be a different configuration every time you see it. Those type of descriptions are the best because you kind of have a narrow field of focus on what you want to create. This character could be anyone, could be a skinny old man, it could be a little short gnome, which gives us a lot of freedom to play with. So we can just start with something like this, and then always just make sure I have a new layer. For this stage, you really don't have to work large at all. This is something that's just a habit for me. And included in this course is my brush pack. I use my brushes for about everything. DG main, I use it for thumbnailing, I use it for rendering. I've pretty much used it for 15 years. I use it for all my work at Blizzard, DG main, all the way. So I think the biggest part about thumbnailing when we start here is to not get really constrained. You know, my sketching when I start is pretty messy. And it's almost to the point where I don't even take my hand off the tablet. And so, you know, I'm trying to figure out what the character could be, but I just want to keep moving. It's almost like you're running a race and I want to do some weird sprint right off the bat. Because a lot of these lines and mistakes as you're painting ends up giving me a lot of kind of random ideas as I go. Sometimes these lines create folds and spots that I wasn't kind of consciously thinking of. And then it may actually fuel a different idea that I pick up later. And so because of these weird lines that I'm putting all over, it kind of gives me a thought of how they might kind of be folding different pieces of fabric and cloth around them. They, you know, are they kind of more this like dirty, like street urchin, really messy clothes, dirt all over the bottom? Is he holding anything? And so we know he has a merchant. He's going to be selling a lot of goods. That's a huge part to think. That's going to be a huge part of this character. How does he store his equipment? Is part of his equipment magical? Does he have like a magic rug that he flips out and it contains different things? And so you can see with these, this is just kind of like bags and blankets and stuff maybe attached to his back. But I don't want to get so worked up into it right now where I'm thinking about the small detail, like how does the bag work? What actually is it? This is all just like really quick silhouette ideas. And just thinking of the entire thing in general. You know, I think it's better to just start painting instead of spending a while thinking about what you want to do. I like to just dive in and get my hand moving, especially since if you can get a couple of these sketches out of the way early in the day, that's the best way to do it. Since your first few are usually not the ones you land on anyway, so let's just get them done and out of the way. Where this one doesn't, to me, doesn't feel unique enough. It's kind of like a standard proportion person with a bunch of stuff on. But I think it's good to get even one of these down because what you want to show your leader art director is a ton of options. Really give them the ability to get their feedback and input in, and they always appreciate that type of exploration. So even like this one right here, this one could be done for as far as the sketch goes. Sometimes I'll create this separate layer that sits underneath this layer right here. Let's name this top layer just the line work, and so we can keep track of it. We'll call this layer underneath a color, but we won't be doing color right now. We'll just keep it in black and white. And sometimes we can just take this and I'll just do something quick underneath it, just so it reads real quick. Don't worry about being messy. And we start up on the next one. For this course, I want to go through the entire production of how I handle concept art with almost every single task that I have to do at the studio. We're going to be having assignments, so you're going to work on your own characters. If you're interested in this course, go to proko.com/Greco, and I'll see you on over there. So basically you're just doing a whole bunch of these and you're hoping as you go, as you're trying to like really squeeze out more and more ideas, is that they almost like they get more extreme because you're trying to find more ideas. If I can make myself do 10 for my first pass of a character, I feel like that's a good number. I'm really trying to squeeze every drop of ideas. And it's funny, most of the time, where I really feel like I can't think of anything else, this is it. And it's those 1 or 2 ideas that happen after that are almost always the ideas that I end up landing on and being some of the best ideas to have. And so we're just taking a character, we're kind of changing the proportions up a little bit. Maybe this one's a little bit stronger, has like a larger kind of top part to their body. I'm not like super worried about their anatomy, you know, as long as you kind of have like a pretty general idea. But this gives me different ideas of kind of how they might wear their clothing. You know, either they have a hood, they have hair. This is a great place to figure it out. Maybe he actually carries a bunch of stuff on his shoulder. He has one large shoulder pad and backpack straps. But yeah, I never even mind if it looks like some anatomy is getting real crazy, especially in this stage. This is like a nice, relaxing stage of painting that you can do in the morning. This part of painting is really even more for you than it is the rest of the team. This is letting you kind of loosen up your ideas in the morning. It's like if you're doing like a regular workout, you have to stretch your brain muscles in the morning. You know how some days you feel more creative than others. And so it's really, this is like your little light jog in the morning and figure out kind of what it could be. So as I'm going from kind of one sketch to the next, I don't look at my previous one too much. The only biggest thing that I look at is I want to make sure that enough of it is different than what I did before and try to make sure I keep pushing on that. You know, sometimes they're too similar, but this stage is a stage where you really want to play around and get crazier and crazier. So like, even when I look at it right now, I can tell that I'm still kind of warming up in the morning. Like these feel like very safe. There's really nothing hitting right now that's like showing what this character should be or could be or make him super unique. So that just means we just keep sketching, but I still like to keep him there because you never know if there's a small part that the AD may like and hit on. And so it's good just to keep it there. All right, so like before, we could try some like short ones. Maybe it's actually more of a smallish gnome type character that's offering all these goods, these like long robes that he could have that it could be kind of tattered with a scarf with all his equipment. And we're trying to keep it almost just as loose as before. We're not even worried about the character's face really. We can get into that later. What's great about this stage also is because you might not have a ton of information and your lead and art director might not have a ton of information either. So really what these sketches do is they open up a dialogue. Is that when you get these over, you'll be like, well, I was thinking about this. And then maybe that gives them some ideas that they hadn't thought of, which makes your next stage so much more powerful and in a better direction because you've had that discussion already. But we can make it so maybe he's holding something that's holding a ton of these goods that hang down or are attached to it. Like I said before, this is just as much for you as it is for any other part of the team. This is really trying to figure out random ideas that you think that might work or might not. Because then maybe in your head you're thinking, is this character older? Are they younger? You have to think if he's carrying all these goods around, are they really strong? Or do they have huge, massive like sacks and containers that they haul around the world? Maybe let's even try to push even harder with the proportions. The characters maybe has like a larger midsection, or is it more kind of like magic based? And so someone as small of a gnome is conjuring all these things. The big goal of what the character is supposed to do or what they're supposed to provide the game needs to be a huge focus of your piece. Otherwise, that will be pointed out right away when you send it. They're like, well, this character needs to be doing this. We don't see how we can do that with what you've presented us. You know, let's find something super interesting. How can we push and pull the character? And then if we have to kind of figure out how it fits in the box a little bit as we go, we can do that. But having a memorable, unique character is still number one when you're working on this. And maybe he has robes, maybe he has pants. These are things we can kind of play with as we go. I try not to worry too much if they're all standing on the same ground plane or not. Like I said, this is all just trying to get these loose lines in. That'll make a huge difference. I always like these big characters that have a bunch of like little animals on them. Maybe he's got like a bunch of kittens or birds that sleep on his shoulder. He's got so many goods hanging all over between like pots and pans and old relics on this huge backpack that he has. Maybe even if he had like a couple of kittens up here, maybe he's attached to part of his shoulder. There's like this little bowl that holds their food. That's what's great about the part of the process is that as you find these small things that might have been created by accident, is what does that fuel into the next part of the design? It's not all laid out before you get started, and you kind of find your path as you paint. And that's very much my process. I know a lot of concept artists, very, very different process. So you may go into it with very clean line drawings, you know exactly what you want to draw, or you might paint a little bit like I do, which is kind of like a sketching madness. Like your brain is on fire. You're just trying to escape before it all collapses. And even if like you're really feeling it and diving into it, it's always good to be like, all right, that's enough. It gets the idea across. Let's get another one done. So same thing, we could have one, maybe this character is a lot older and more kind of like hunched over. I want to keep pushing the proportions of these as we go, as our hand gets more loose. Like I said, like a lot of their facial features will matter a lot as we continue this process. But right now, I don't want to worry about really any of it. He's got like really kind of like long fingers too. Really just kind of messing with proportions, see how much we can stretch stuff. How much can we pull it around? Maybe even as you go, like, oh yeah, I don't really like it just with the legs here. Let me throw this kind of like little tattered robe over one leg. You can always go back and erase part of it quick. I think what's nice about these parts of any stage is how messy you can be. Don't have to worry about it looking pretty, about going like dropping right in your portfolio. This is all for the function of yourself and the team and trying to find the best ideas that you can. Then we could figure out kind of like what gets placed on his arms, on his hands. What makes this character be the certain shopkeepers that travels around the world? There's definitely this idea of this kind of like dirty traveler we want to try to capture later. Sometimes I may kind of plop some little props and stuff behind him. Kind of just helps your brain think about everything that it could be. Like if he had it all on display, everything that he wanted you to look at. Maybe he's got some like, strange scepter in his hand. Who knows? It's easy just to plop it in and that really not mean anything right now. Does he have a big sash for a belt? Like what are small things, even at this stage, that we can apply to the character that will break up the silhouette some? Having like a really interesting silhouette is a huge part of the characters that I design. And so that is something that I think about a lot. Sometimes they have to be symmetrical, but for a character like this, going asymmetrical and having it be pretty unique, I think would be justified in any type of character like this. And some great parts that break up the silhouette is, small things around the waist is usually really good for any studio to have like assets around the waist, stuff on the wrist, bracers, obviously a shoulder piece. You just have to be careful when it comes to like certain straps or certain connections that happen within a character. Like you would never want something like a bracelet around the wrist that is hooked up to a chain that's connected to their waist or something. You always have to think about how this character needs to be built. How is it going to animate? Do they have the budget for it? Is it going to have the bones available as far as animation goes? And so you really have to think about a lot of that stuff. So sometimes I'll give some little ideas of hair, even if it's just quick little ideas. Maybe it's all scarred and slashed up here, but that's something we can throw on. Just block in the color behind them. Sometimes my images they get larger and larger. I think it's worth actually getting some female characters into. It didn't actually say male or female. So let's do a whole bunch of these. Now I think we can hopefully get a kind of same breadth of variety as we go on these as well. So it's almost like the exact same process. I want to keep it just as loose with the character and what they could be doing. I think the goods that they're carrying is going to be a huge part of this character. I think I have to try to make sure to keep those in most of the sketches that we have done here. And maybe she has kind of a cloak that kind of goes to one side and a ton of different things that go across that hold. Let's see here. like different baubles and potions and stuff. And then those go up towards around the top of the shoulder. You know, I always like these kind of like larger, baggier pants that kind of happen above the knee. Then you kind of have like a nicer boot that kind of comes down. The idea of her hair in the back. See, it really doesn't take long just to keep throwing more and more ideas down. And I promise you, the more time you spend doing this, the easier it will come. And trust me, your designs and what you end up in your portfolio will be so much better because you spent the time to do this part. Instead of just diving right into a pose, right into a painting, it is worth the exploration. A big part of being a concept artist is the idea generation. You know, I think being creative in that position is like 85% of it. You know, when someone comes into a studio, even they can always learn to render better or to get their anatomy better. But when it comes to creativity and thinking of new ideas, that is something that's really hard to teach people. And so that is what a studio wants to see, is how are you able to take the ideas that you have in your head and get them onto paper for the rest of the team to see. And so your ability to show that process of your ideas and how you can translate them makes a huge difference. It's a big reason why a lot of studios, when they look at, say, like a splash image done in a portfolio, it's hard for them to really interpret that on kind of how you will perform as a concept artist. Since it's really just kind of rendering a very still thing that it doesn't show that creativity and how you're taking loose ideas and loose descriptions. It is something that the team could use and build off of. Super, super important. Maybe she has a bunch of these rugs that roll out and they hang off the back of her here, which I think this would actually be doable from their perspective. And maybe as she flips them out, the magical properties make all the goods kind of appear on it. And so that's why she always can have different goods around the world. I really like that idea. You were introducing new ideas into the entire pipeline. Maybe that idea for that totally changes what a designer wants to do with the gameplay. They'd be like, oh yeah, we can do a ton of different stuff with that. We can have like different type of rugs, and there are different colors, and there are different patterns based on what she has. And you know, those conversations that happen because of this exact process and thinking can change the entire scope and direction of either a character or a gameplay dynamic. And this all happens because you're just kind of this free thought of sketchy ideas. And that's when a lot of that creativity and idea generation, why it plays such a major part in concept art, and how like your fingers are in so many different parts of game development. That's really what makes it so special. All right, so let's get another one painted here. As much as I like the idea of where she is going now, as much as I like the idea from 2 of them ago, let's keep going, because maybe we'll think of something we actually like even more. I'm telling you, as you get deeper and deeper into these ideas, you find some really strange stuff. And you know, it's not always gonna work. Sometimes it's gonna feel really bizarre, and you can tell you're really scraping the bottom, but it's worth trying to scrape it. Like, I'm really trying to change so much of the silhouette in this one, where it's almost like you don't even see a face. It's just all these like tattered clothes and robes. This really large, mysterious figure. But it's these, you know, shapes and ideas right here. They're pretty special. And you can keep pushing it more and more. It's always better to go too far. You kind of know where those borders are and able to pull it back. You know, people on your team are like, you know, all right, that, you know, that's good, but it's probably too far for what we're looking for. It's much better to be in that position than have not explored far enough in the first place. Then you kind of never know where those edges are. But as you can see, I'm trying to have at least every person so far have a different silhouette at least. So maybe later, whoever's reviewing these or whoever we're brainstorming with, maybe we can start combining some ideas. There's actually a lot of characters that I've worked on World of Warcraft that have really come out from this exact process, where it really wasn't an idea that was written down, but because it was an idea that was formed from this stage, that it changed so much of the direction of a lot of things and how we want to take characters. Sometimes there's just a character that me and the lead just liked so much that we would actually pitch it to the rest of the team that they might not even thought of, and then that would get picked up because that gave them more ideas. Sometimes you may do 10 of these and are like, nah, none of these really kind of hit picture alike, or gives them a bunch of ideas to generate off of. You know, maybe there's actually some goods that kind of float above. Like, there's such a big mystery to this character. I think we're actually looking in a pretty good spot.
All right, so these are the thumbnails I made for my course. If you want to know how to get from thumbnailing ideas into a finished rendered piece, sign up for my course at proko.com/Greco. Students have been posting a ton of awesome work in the assignments, and this process is how I develop characters for concepting in the game industry. Go check it out.